Hey everyone, Pete Calandra here. On today's video, we'll be doing a detailed breakdown of the second release from my Straight Up project, and this tune is titled Same As It Ever Was. It's a really fun, upbeat, energetic jazz track that features some beautiful flute by my friend Dave Weiss. I'm playing piano and electric guitar on this. There's also some world marimbas and driving percussion and hand percussion. Anyway, it's a fun track that I'm really happy with. My friend Ken Freeman did the mix. I set up the mix and he did all the finalizing, the adjusting and the processing and the mastering. Did a great job. We're going to be looking at all that plus the compositional elements. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Leave any comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and let's get right into it. Before we get into some detail, let's get an overview of how the session is set up, the kinds of instruments we've got, and how they're organized, etc. So on the top of the session, we've got our drum tracks. So we've got kick drum, and I'll just play little snippets. Cross stick, hi-hats, big toms, cymbals, and they're all routed through the drum master, which is right here, and then there's a VCA for the drums so that I can solo the drums very easily. Then below that we've got our hand percussion. I've got shaker, and notice these are all color coordinated, and 2 tracks of claps. So we have, those are sampled claps, and then over here there's me clapping. You can hear me grunting, keeping time, and then they both play together. Just having that just slight imperfection in the timing really brings out a lot of life in those 2 tracks are playing together. Then there is a hand drum right here. That's this track. And Latin percussion, so this is congas most likely. And then they go through their own submaster, and the percussion is VCA'd. Then right here we've got our ethnic instruments right here, and that would be this really interesting ethnic guitar. So these are instruments that are found in the native instruments and then Gili. So I played all these in. And the track is a combination of live instruments and sampled instruments. And this is another mallet instrument with resonator gourds underneath it. So that you can hear is, so you can hear the resonating gourds there. And right here, that's just straight marimbas. So that's kind of interesting the way that that's broken up. And that also has a submaster with some processing and a VCA. One of my concepts with doing a track like this is that all of the different choirs, the drum kit, the percussion, all these mallets, these ethnic instruments, they should all sound complete on their own. They should sound good in combination with each other, in combination with, let's say, the drums, and these ethnic instruments should sound really good. The hand percussion and these ethnic instruments should sound really good. These, the Latin percussion and the drums should sound good. So all the combinations, they should sound good together. Then I've got my lead guitar track right here. And that's played on a Les Paul. And then I have 4 tracks of piano, right? These dark blue tracks here. And they're all from different spots. So the opening, then the body of the tune, Then there's a solo in the middle. And I've got the right hand and the left hand separated. And that's so I can control the level of each one. And then another solo piano at the end here. So that's the piano, and it's got its own set of processing, as well as individual processing. Then here's something interesting. This is in that Native Instruments collection. It's called a Fula. So I played this in, and there's a ton of processing on it. That was the original track, and then I got the idea that it would sound really good if I had a human doubling that. So I got my friend Dave Weiss, who's the top ethnic flute player in New York City, and he played this on a wooden flute. I wrote it out, and then he just doubled. There's Dave, and now the two together. It's really cool because the fula is sort of wrapped around his sound and creates this sort of sheen around the real flute. Really works out well. And we'll go over the processing and the parts. Then I've got my orchestral instruments here. Got Glock. Beautiful Glock choir. I think this is from the Joby Burgess Spitfire Audio. This is the Eric Whitaker from Spitfire Audio choir. And then these long strings are from the Spitfire Audio chamber strings. And then we've got short staccato strings also from the chamber strings. And then we've got this really weird processed vocals right here. And we'll go through that in more detail. So let's take a quick listen to some of this. And not the whole piece, but we'll listen to a minute, 90 seconds or so. And then we'll get through a more detailed breakdown on the other side. We'll get into detail about the processing and all the parts and everything like that. But the first thing I want to talk about is the arrangement and how I've built this up. So we start off with just hand drums and some of these ethnic instruments down here, the mallets and this ethnic guitar groove, right? And you see how that's layered. So first it's just starting out with this stuff, and then the ethnic guitar comes in right at measure 3. And then right at measure 5, we got the bass, we've got the guitars, and then the drum kit comes in. And when the drums come in, it's an interesting where I've sort of taken this ethnic groove and I've mixed up cultures, right? I've got sort of like an Afro-influenced groove at the beginning, and then when the drums come in, they're sort of playing 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so that's taken from reggae, the one-drop groove that's found in a lot of reggae songs where the kick drum is on 2 and 4 and there's no backbeat on the snare drum. So that's kind of cool. So let's listen to that much right now. And now more mallets come in. Then the piano starts after the downbeat. So in other words, right here we've got the mallets coming in and the hi-hats. And then the piano comes in sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right, it comes in at the end of bar 9. More layering and pyramiding and building up of the entrances of the different instruments. And the piano here is just sort of dancing around. It's a nice little introduction, and then I'll get into a little bit of a groove playing in a second here. So let's take it a little bit further in. And here the groove starts. And then right before the melody comes in, I've got this rhythmic figure. Boo-da-bee-bop-da-da. It just lets you know that we're transitioning into another section. And just lets the groove breathe for a second instead of having this constant rhythm going on, right? So we've got just a little bit of a pause there with the time. I lead into that with a drum fill and a mallet roll. So let me solo those out. Boom, bum, bee, bum, 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 ba-doom, boom, boom. Right, and in. And then now, the first time the melody comes in, it's played just by the piano. Okay, so we're in the second half of the verse here. And the answering phrase is augmented with strings and glockenspiel. And then on that rhythmic figure that led us into the first verse, when it comes in this time, the flute makes its first entrance. So you see how I'm layering all of this stuff and it's continually building and shifting around. And that's a big part of my orchestrational conception. If you've watched any of my film scoring class videos, I've talked about that over and over again. I practice what I preach. And then the second time through the melody, at measure 31, the flute is taking over the melody and the guitar comes in and layers in with the answering phrase. So we have a variation on the first verse where the first 4 bars here, it's the piano and the flute playing the melody, and then the guitar and the piano playing the answering phrase. And then on the second half of the verse, the same pattern continues, except we do what we did in the first verse and have the short strings and the glock layering in with the guitar and the piano. Then at measure 38, instead of having that boo bop bum ba ba da bum ba dum figure, I do a different figure because I'm leading into the solo section, right? I just want the groove to move into there. I don't want there to be a little bit of pause because it's starting to get a little bit repetitive that every 8 bars there's that bam, 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 bam. I wanted something a little bit different to flow and move us into the next section. So let's take it from the middle of the second verse into the guitar solo. Let's mute the guitar and listen to the accompaniment. You'll see that the choir comes in. Very simple. Playing very simple stuff. And then right here, we've got that strange processed vocals. I'll turn them up so you can hear them now, but I didn't want them this loud during the mix. You know, it sounds like a Peter Gabriel kind of a technique, something that he would do on one of his tunes. It's really cool. And the other thing we do here I like is, and this was Ken's idea, during the body of the song, there's 2 rhythm guitars, one panned left and one panned right. But during the guitar solo, we just go to the one that's playing the really funk rhythm there. Just sort of opens it up and just drives. We don't need to have so much stuff there. It gives us a little room to build for the flute solo. So let's take it from the guitar solo again with the guitar in it. Playing that on a Les Paul, and that's going through a Mesa TA15 amp into a Rivera Rock Crusher recording directly into Pro Tools. And then at the end of the guitar solo, the flute does a little pickup. The guitar plays that kind of bluesy lead, and it leads us into this key change for the flute solo. Let's take a listen just to the last few bars of the guitar solo and listen to the flute solo, and then we'll break that down musically. I am going to go through the processing as well, but let's just get through some of the music stuff first. So right there I have that figure, and we haven't heard it in a while, so it's nice and fresh still, as opposed to being a regular pattern that repeats every 8 bars. Now, if we mute the flutes, you'll notice that when we change key, the strings start playing a rhythmic pattern. And that's almost a Montuno kind of rhythm, and I think it blends in really nicely with the piano. So that's kind of cool. So that's what I was talking about before with everything locking in no matter what instrument groups you're listening to. And then we go into the piano solo. I have the energy breakdown here. There's no guitar. And notice lack of mallet instruments and ethnic guitar and Latin percussion. We go back to that one drop feel in the drums. And then right there, the cross stick comes in. And there's light choir that comes in at that point. You have to strain to hear it, but it's definitely there. And I'm playing on some Mixolydian kind of mode here, just improvising. And then right here, all the other instruments come back in. And when I'm soloing, I lead into that, right? And when that groove starts to come in more fully, I'm just playing this one riff over and over again and just driving that home in my right hand. So I lead, and then diddy-da-da-da-bop, leading into the downbeat. So I start before the measure. And then right here, doing my best Chuck Leavell, Bruce Hornsby. And then back into the head. This is very similar to the second verse, except at the very end, we're going into the outro. So I only play the melody once at the end. I don't repeat the A section or the verse. At the end, I've got this triplet figure that comes in that leads us to the outro. So let's take a listen to that. And one thing to note about that that's kind of fun is the bass starts off really high and then drops down the octave. Right? As we're getting to the cadence, it's going down lower and lower. And then we've got this outro. Similar. So now, not similar, but the first time that that piano solo comes in the middle of the song, all of the mallets and the ethnic guitar, they drop out, and we just have the bass and the drums. At the outro, I do the opposite. LP and mallets and Geely and ethnic guitar. And a little drum fill that matches the string line. And that brings us into the entrance of the bass. And notice how I don't have the bass come in right on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3. Right, it comes in on and a 4. So I delay that by a measure. It's just a little weird and a little unusual, but when you offset things like that, I don't know, it adds some interest to me because it takes away some of the predictability. And when the drums start playing this time, we've got a groove on the ride cymbal. Let's solo the drums here. And we've got the one drop on the kick drum. And then we get back into the full beat right here. Let's take a listen to how that builds up. And when the rhythm fills out, it starts to move a little bit more. My piano playing gets a little bit busier, and I do these lines that lead up into a higher register, and then I start playing almost like a Montuno kind of a rhythm in my right hand. Some accents and stuff. Let's take a listen. There we go. And that do dee do da do da da do. And then we're going to go into the fade out. I start playing stuff that's more bluesy, and I lead it into a sort of a circular oompa-cha, oompa-cha, oompa-cha figure. We'll see that in a second. Here we go. And then the fast notes as it's fading out. A couple of other things to talk about. When the cross stick comes in, it's playing a clave rhythm over 2 bars. So that's a 3-2 clave. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Right? So that's a 3-2 clave. And again, if I solo the piano there, you'll see that it all fits in. And if I add the rhythm guitars, if I add our ethnic percussion and the drums, we talked about this earlier. So that's a breakdown of the music. Fun, upbeat, happy piece of music, which I think is something the world needs more of these days. Let's take a quick look at some of the processing that we've done here. Like I said, I got this mix up into a good state, and then my friend Ken Freeman did the final mix. The stuff that he added really brought out a lot of the music in this track. Starting with our kick drum, let's mute the processing. So we start out with a little pool tech. Just making a little bit beef. It's about 30, right? And then the Pro Q3, just taking out a little bit of that mid-range around 200-300 hertz. So you can hear some of the snap. So there is a little bit of a boost here, but you get more of the snap, right, by carving out some of this area here rather than boosting this area here, because what's going on here is covering that up. So we've boosted some of the low end here and then scooped out some in the middle and then added some more up here. And then that's just going through a C4 to keep everything from any one frequency from dominating. And then the kick just is going through an 1176. I mean the snare drum, sorry, the cross stick. And that's only doing a little bit of compression, but it sort of makes the sound a little edgier. It's kind of cool. With the hats, I've got just the stock Pro Tools EQ7, and that's the sound. It's a nice round sound, but that has a little bit of an edge to it, and I've carved out all that low end, so there's nothing to get in the way of the kick drum and the bass guitar. In the full spectrum of the track, you don't need to have all that low end in the hi-hats. And then the toms, they're big toms. We've got them going through the Fairchild, the Pro Q3, and let's take a listen to what each one does and add them in step by step. So this is nothing. Big. And then the Fairchild just makes it sound even bigger. You know, it's not so much the compression, it's the coloration the software adds to the sound. And then the Pro Q, just carving out some of that, right? Making it a little bit more defined. Getting rid of some of the mud. And then the Q4, the C4, I'm sorry, just keeping any frequency from sticking out too much. Not affecting the high end too much, though. And then the cymbals just have a high pass and a little sheen added to the top there. So let's take a listen to the full drum kit. Now, the full drum kit is being processed through the master, and I have a 2019 Mac Pro. It's a fairly powerful computer, so what I've been doing on recent mixes is plugging reverbs right into the master of all the groups instead of having an aux input and a send. And so we start off with C4 across the whole kit. Again, just to even things out and stop any one frequency from really jumping out. Yeah, you could hear it. And then what's kind of cool is I've got that all put into the Ocean Way Studios. And it's just some ambience. So bypassed, in. It's not like a big reverb. It's just ambience around the drums. It's like you're in a room. It's really cool. Let's do something here and let's listen to all three of these microphones. So this first mic right here is an AKG C12, and that's about 6.8 feet away. Actually, let's solo the wet signal. Let's mute that. And now we've got the C12 at about almost 15 feet away. And you see I've got high pass on all three active. And then now an M50 26 feet away. And then add all three together. And then blend them all together with the actual dry signal. So with the percussion, not a lot of processing going on with each individual track. The shakers, quite a bit of high pass, just to keep, again, we don't need to hear. Yeah, it just changes the fundamental frequency of the shaker, and it gets rid of anything low that we don't need for this particular bit. Didn't do anything with the claps, the hand drum. Yeah, the same thing, just some high pass filter. And the same with the kunga, except this time just a little bit of around 4K, just to bring out the slap. And then that's going through this EQ. Let's take it from over here. So let's bypass all of these processes here. Okay, so now we'll add in the HEQ. So you can hear that the kungas are a little thinner and a little bit more pointed and a little bit more defined. They'll cut through this dense mix a little bit better. Then the next thing is the C4. Again, just evening everything out so it's bypassed. You can see it's just doing a little bit of work here. You know, it's barely noticeable. And the last bit is the pure plate from UA. And if we look here, I've got a lot of the bass rolled off and I've added some treble. It's about a little over 1 second of reverb time. So it's a really bright percussion plate, right? Moving down, we'll go to our Ethnic Percussion VCA. And let's do this. Let's mute the master. So with this one, on our Ethnic Guitar Groove, there's just some API. And I'll bypass this. Right, just adding a little bit of crispness to the sound, a little less mud. That's perfectly fine. The processed sound will fit in the mix better. Then our Geely high pass with a little snap up around 4. We'll bypass it. See, it's nice and round, which is great for solo. But that'll cut through the mix better. Oh, this one's really got quite a EQ curve on it. That's not something I do very often. Yeah, very muddy. That sounds thin, but you got to realize that there's so much going on. And then let's see. Same thing over here. All of those are going through the master right here, and the first thing is the C4, and we'll take it from where it's a little denser. You can see it's cutting out some of that mid-range. Again, very subtle, not a lot of work being done, but when you take all of these small moves and you add them together, the aggregate of all of them have a really nice effect on the entire mix. For this, we're going back to that pure plate. The bass has a lot of processing. Let's take a look at the bass first with no processing, and then we'll bring them in one at a time. Let's take it from the middle. So the first thing is our radiator from Sound Toys. And this is just adding some low end, not a ton of drive. I haven't really driven the input. I've made it clean. I've gotten rid of the noise, but it just adds a nice roundness to the sound, right? And then here I'm boosting some low end around 100. Just adding just a little bit more low end, so I'm building up the sound the way I want it. And this will fit in really nicely with the kick drum, especially by the time I'm done with this, right? We're going to compress it with the LA2A, and this is not really doing a lot of compression, I don't think, but it is adding some gain and some fullness. Yeah, just basically 1 dB at times. Yeah, you can hear that it's louder, and it's warmer. So I'm using this as not just a compressor, but also as a coloration device. And then this is something that Ken added. He brought out 1K, which almost gives you that Jocko kind of sound. And then a C4 across everything just to smooth things out again. Now, we go to our guitars. We'll do guitar 1. So this should be on the left. Very clean, very dry. There's, right, so that's a Strat, and then there's a little bit of compression with the 76 here. And then let's listen to the Pro Q. What that does, just takes down some of the high end. And we'll come down here and we'll look at the other side, the right side. And with this, got the same, right, we got the 1176. Very similar. And the Pro Q3 doing same thing as the other side. And this is a much simpler part, right? But where this sound differs is that I'm adding chorus from the Arturia Juno 6 or June 6. And the way the two guitars together sound. Right? And let's take a listen to how it's processed through the master bus. So I'm driving this radiator this time and removing some of the bass and adding a little treble. So it's just exciting the sound and making my playing sound a lot better than it actually is. And here, again, cutting some low end off using the C4. Now, I don't think that this is actually doing anything here. No, that's why it was muted. Okay, so on the lead guitar, this is going through some processing on the track and then running through a master track where there's a lot of processing. So the first thing we have is, right, just getting rid of some of the low end and the high end and just giving you mid-range, which will cut through nicely. And then that's being compressed with this LA2A. So that's adding some gain, and again, the LA2A adds fullness to the sound, right? It's really cool. And that's going through this lead guitar master here. And again, just boosting some of this mid-range here and adding some of that high end back. You know, it's sort of like doing all this processing to get to the sound, right? I should just get it better out of the amp. Just a little bit more clarity here with the API. And let's see, is this compressor doing anything? Yeah, that's definitely coloring the sound, that H compressor. Now, this is kind of cool. Let's close off all the time-based effects. So the first thing we have is a Memory Man clone from Arturia. Right? It's kind of cool. Have that in left-right ping-pong mode. And then feeding that into the H delay, which is doing a dotted eighth note, and that is ping-ponging left and right. So the two delays together. Let's mute the Memory Man for a second. Right? Got that really filtered. I've got a low-pass filter on that. So I'm really just chopping off a lot of the high end. And then add the Memory Man. So the aggregate of those delays really is an interesting timbre. And then the last thing is it's going through capital chambers. Really nice. Moving on. Got the piano and just adding some of the air band here on the piano. I'll bypass it. Right, you can hear it's just a little darker with that. It's a tiny, tiny, subtle difference. And then one thing I'm doing here with the left hand, and we'll go through the master piano track to hear the time-based effects we're using. Just adding a little heat with the little radiator, right? Radiator, that's Brooklynese. Okay, so through the master on the piano, right, adding a little more in the upper bands, but one thing I like to do is just scoop out a tiny bit on my piano around 500. So I'll bypass that and you'll hear it sounding a little boxy, and then when I bring it in, it'll get a lot clearer. Just that tiny bit there makes a huge difference. And then we've got the LA2A. That seems to be bypassed. Oh no, we've got the Fairchild, that's right. It's very subtle what it's doing. And then I'm using the Seventh Heaven Professional, and this was a recommendation from Ken. It has a beautiful sound, so I'm using one of the plate. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, we're almost through this. The flute and the fula have some processing on it, but I want to go to the flute master. So let's solo the two of these, and we'll go into the solo section. So the first thing is, let's get rid of that piano. Here we go. Just a high pass filter. I wanted the sound to be more breathy, so I scooped out over here, and let's bypass this and bring it in. So you can hear without the EQ, it's got a really nice round tone, but I really liked the breathiness and airiness of this. It sort of gave it a little bit, I don't know, it's not ethereal, but it's got something that I think fit better with the track. Then we're doing some compression here with the Teltronics. And then we're doing some Echo Boy, right? We've got eighth note dot. Just a couple of repeats. Got the feedback all the way minimum, right? And then drenched with the Pro R reverb. And then there's some processing on the rest of this orchestral stuff, but it's not huge processing. I want to talk about here with this processed vocal. So let's mute all of these bits. We'll play the sound and then we'll add each element in. Right? So adding the air talk box. And again, this is the concept of every one of these things does a little bit something, and then when you're done, the aggregate sound is really much different than what you started out with. So that gets a little bit more nasally. And then we've got air kill, and I'm getting rid of all. Right? The mids and the highs, and now we're getting somewhere. And then it was a little out of tune, so I'm using Waves Tune to tune it. And now adding a quarter note delay, ping-ponged left and right. So that's only going center and right because I've got the output panned, the left in the center, and then the right output all the way to the right. And then that's going through the Pro R with generous, copious amounts of reverb. It's really cool. Let's take a listen to a little bit of this track again, and I'll catch you on the other side. And that's a detailed look at Same As It Ever Was. I really love this track. I think it came out really well. Please go to the links down below after February 15th and stream this, save it, put it on playlists on Spotify, go to iTunes. You'd really help the channel out. Anyway, I just appreciate everybody just watching my videos. I've been Pete Calandra. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.